Yana here, President of the MASU. I first want to begin by saying that it was an absolute honor of serving as your president this year, and although we had a lot of difficult times, it was definitely great knowing that you folks had faith in us to help you get through those difficult times, and you helped us with our advocacy work, as well as raising your concerns at all times, making sure that your voices are being heard. Thank you for all that. A lot of the work that we were able to accomplish this year was not going to be able to be done without your support. And lastly, I want to say, thank you for having kept me around on the MASU for 3 years. It was definitely an absolute honor for working with all of you, whether it be counselors, students at large, our staff, or any of our other representatives. So thank you very much. I'm going to do just a quick overview of some of the wins and some of the work that I accomplished this year, but a more detailed document is available within our council minutes, which can be found on our masu.ca website. So right off the bat, one of the big wins that we got this year is that we got the Board of Regents to look into the Board of Regents Finance and Administration Committee to look into finding a way to include more correspondence courses within Mount Allison. We also spent a lot of time this summer. I spent working with the Black Student Union, the Honor Society, and the Student Life Office to hire our first ever Black Student Advisor, diversity educator. And the MASU also contributed $8,000 towards that position, which was a huge win. Following that, there was a lot of time spent this summer planning for the New Brunswick Student Alliance priorities for the year. The NBSA's priorities included 3 topics, and it was international students, Indigenous students, and financial aid. All of those topics were brought forward during our annual advocacy week that happened in November. So we had 5 asks. We brought those asks to the provincial government, and then of course we also discussed them during our pre-budget campaign, and as well as pre-budget consultation with the Minister of Finance. The NBSA this year also had a hashtag Don't Cut Our Future campaign, which focused on the cuts that were made in May. And this campaign really helped bring some of our voices to the provincial government, and just to let them know that we are here and we are seeing all the cuts that are being made. So please don't cut any more of our services or our supports. This year we also had our federal Get Out the Vote campaign, so a lot of time was spent towards that. Thank you all for coming out, pledging, and for voting. And it was a really big campaign. And the MASU actually got number 1 within CASA of collecting the most pledges. So thank you all for supporting us during that campaign, but most importantly, thank you for voting. Following that, I was also elected to sit on the board of CASA as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I was also elected to be the Chair of the New Brunswick Student Alliance. I'm not going to go into the great details of that, but some of the wins that I did get through the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is that we were able to have a first ever Indigenous inaugural conference. So that brought forward a lot of Indigenous student representatives all together, and they were able to work away on some things. And this resulted in CASA passing permanently to have it in the National Indigenous Advisory Committee. We also passed to have a permanent position for Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and a permanent committee for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at CASA. So that was one of the big wins that I got this year through CASA that I'm very thankful for. Within CASA, also our advocacy points included financial aid, Indigenous students, and international students. We were able to actually hear that some of those wins that are related to financial aid were going to be included within the budget, but of course everything that's happening, that's been pushed to a later date, so we will wait to hear about that a little bit later. The other thing that this year that I was able to accomplish, we created our first ever MASU partnership package, and we secured a partner with RBC. We also had culture sensitivity training for all of our RAs, our academic mentors, orientation committee, orientation crew members, and of course our entire executive and student administrative council was also able to receive that training. That really helped us lead the way that some of our work was being done this year. Following that, we had also our discussions began about the Nimbus, which is an online tutoring app. So those discussions started this year, but unfortunately we're not able to wrap them up. So hopefully next year's executive looks into it. It is basically like Uber, but for tutoring. So definitely a great resource for students to have. This year I also held a focus group that was with male football players to discuss the unique issues that they face as Black male athletes at Mount Allison. So the topics that kind of came out of the discussion that I later on advocated on were mental health resources, confidentiality within the wellness center, culture competency training for staff, and an EDI task force, so equity, diversity, inclusion task force. And those advocacy points are remaining, and something that was a topic of discussion going into the winter semester as well. Finally, during the winter time, of course, we had the strike, so a lot of my work and time went into working with MAFA as well as the university administration to ensure that this doesn't go for longer than it needs to be, and that there's compensation for students, and as well as that there is flexibility around the academic calendar because of the week that we lost. And then, of course, we did release our student charter of rights and responsibilities this year. So that was a great document that was worked on last year, but this year we were able to release it. We also drafted our budget advisory committee. And finally, we had, of course, the pandemic that happened. So during that time, we advocated a lot for different accommodations to be made for students. But more importantly, we did bring forward the pass-fail option for students, which was hopefully something that was helpful for you. And now there's still a lot more things that I would like to discuss, but we are on a time limit. So I'll just wrap up by saying that a lot of things were accomplished this year by the entire executive. And if you do have the time, feel free to look through the document and do a deeper dive into what we actually accomplished this year. And my only final thoughts is that I wish you all a good summer. And if you're going back to Manaus next year, best of luck. I hope that the year is kind to you, and I hope that you have a really memorable one. If you're off to a new adventure, to my fellow grads, best of luck to all of you, and I can't wait to see what all of you accomplish in the years to come. So once again, thank you for having believed in me and our entire executive this year and have supported us continuously. Thanks so much.
Hi everyone. Now, obviously I wish that I could give this address in person. I wish that the past couple weeks I'd been able to spend writing my final papers, my final exams, spending my final couple weeks as Vice President of Academic Affairs of the MASU amongst my friends, on campus, with everybody that I've become so close to over the past 4 years. But that obviously hasn't been possible. And with that in mind, I really hope that everyone is healthy, that they're doing well, that they're managing through these very stressful times, and that their loved ones, their family, their friends are doing well as well. With that in mind as well, I'd also like to hope that everyone has been able to get through the final exam period as well as they can, that they have been able to finish their exams, finish their papers, finish their assignments, finish their theses, and feel good about what happened, what they were able to do. These are unprecedented times, and that is obviously put an undue burden on students to be in a very stressful and unacademic setting for many of us. And I'm very proud of the work that everyone has done, one, in finishing their work, but also in supporting each other. It's been great to see the amount of support that people have given to each other in these very unsettling and very stressful times. Now, this semester for me has been very difficult as Vice President of Academic Affairs of the MASU, starting with a strike in February and kind of leading up to it, as well as then dealing with COVID now. Obviously that has put an immense amount of pressure on the academics of this institution, first in having to try to make up time for the strike that happened, and then also for having to shut down class-based learning as a whole for the school. And obviously that has been my almost entire focus this semester, was one, dealing with the strike, and two, dealing with the response to COVID. So for the strike specifically, it was trying to rejig the academic calendar, move the withdrawal date back, and try to incentivize profs to be lenient. And I think for the most part, that was actually quite successful. For COVID, it kind of gained a life of its own in terms of first dealing with kind of the what's going to happen, academic calendar changes, moving withdrawal dates again, moving submission dates for courses and everything, and working very closely with the registrar and the provost to kind of make these things happen. And then later on, once it kind of became apparent that this was kind of the way that academia was going, was to completely create a new kind of grading system where we could add in pass-fail and other options for students to do. And that was completely brought forward by the MASU even and was passed in Senate, which, as everyone has seen, some of you might have used. And so I'm very proud of that. Before that happened, in last semester and over the summer, though, there's a couple other things that I'd like to point out that I'm very proud of, kind of the work that myself and other senators have done to kind of bring the student experience to a better place. So one of the big ones was the distribution system that has kind of drawn the ire of many students over the past couple of years as kind of being very restrictive and very particular and not being too conducive to the Mount A mission. And so working with the registrar and kind of bringing that to Senate and getting that passed, we now have a much more lenient but also broad and distribution system that offers a lot of breadth and that offers a lot of malleability for students who are trying to complete their degrees. And this is accessible to all students regardless of year now, because it's going to be starting next year. So I'm very proud of the work that I did in that front and was able to bring forward. As well as even before COVID struck and before the need for online course learning became apparent, through the MASU's advocacy, we're starting to bring back a slate of correspondence and online courses, and that's only going to grow with the present and obvious need for more online course learning and a better system of which to administer that COVID has kind of brought to the fore. So our advocacy is bringing that to the forefront and has kind of been responded to. And then finally, there's a greater emphasis on mental health in the classroom that I think that I have been able to bring, and I'm very proud of that myself and other senators from the MASU have kind of been able to bring forward. And so those are just a couple of things that we've kind of been able to do, but at the same time, looking forward, I just hope that everyone is able to get through this. We will get through this. And if I could just take a line from the Chief Health Officer in my home province of British Columbia, stay safe, stay calm, and be empathetic. So thank you very much, and I hope that everyone does well.
Everyone, I hope that you're staying well. As we enter the semester, I hope that you're able to find balance and happiness. If this wasn't the case, remember to be gentle with yourself during this time. Take the time to care for yourself, eat some comfort food, watch some Netflix, go for a walk. I'd like to take this time to overview the year. I'll divide it up based on MASU wins, and then also New Brunswick Student Alliance and Canadian Alliance of Student Association wins. I'll also start by saying that this work was not done alone. Throughout the year, I had the incredible opportunity to work with some great staff. Greg Ellison as the Community Services Coordinator, Natasha Goslin as the Sustainability Coordinator, Jasmine Tremblay-Detour as the Social Justice Coordinator, and Emma Jacobson as the Bike Co-op Coordinator. From a MASU perspective, we started out the year by ramping off our off-campus student engagement during orientation. From there, we ran a Get Out the Vote campaign. This campaign merits a huge shout out to Olivia Corrigan and Michal Mulugera, our Get Out the Vote coordinators. With their help and the help of a great team of volunteers, we were able to collect over 900 pledges to vote, which is the most per capita of any school in Canada. We also participated immensely in the Experiential Learning Steering Committee this year. This aims to make students more prepared for their future. From there, we participated in the development of the Community Food Smart program. This is a bulk food purchasing program that enables students to get about $45 worth of fresh produce for only $15. Within a MASU scope, the Sustainability Committee was able to allocate $20,000 to a project that aims to implement a 3-stream recycling and education program in Tantramar schools. Finally, we purchased snowshoes for the Bike Co-op. Even though they came in late, they're ready for the first snow of 2020. Finally, the MASU was a strong partner in the response to the hospital closure, which has since been put on pause. From a New Brunswick Student Alliance perspective, we created effective policy and advocacy around 3 main themes. The first of these was student financial aid, in which we pushed for the replacement of tuition tax credits with upfront needs-based grants. We also pushed for the establishment of a debt relief program. The second theme was around Indigenous students, in which we pushed for a reconciliation through post-secondary education fund that would support programming and resources on campus. Finally, we pushed for the mandatory training for MLAs. Finally, our last theme was around international students, in which we advocated for capped, predictable tuition. It was a great year at the MBSA. We remain a strong stakeholder in post-secondary education in New Brunswick. From a Canadian Alliance of Student Associations perspective, the first thing to mention is our Get Out the Vote campaign. We then centered our advocacy themes surrounding student financial aid, the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the representation of students on research funding boards, as well as more streamlined opportunities for international students. While the budget drop was delayed due to COVID-19, I'm confident that this advocacy made a difference. That wraps up my update. I've had a fantastic 2 years in the MASU. The school is incredible, and I wish you all the best in the future.
I'm Venna. I'm the current VP Student Life on the MASU, and I just wanted to talk about some of our wins from this year in the Student Life Office of the MASU. First up, cultural competency training. This was something that I worked on with Yana in the summer months to have cultural competency training incorporated into training for residence leaders and orientation leaders leading up to orientation week and the beginning of the year. So that was the first time something like this has been incorporated into our training, and we saw this as something really valuable, and we're looking forward to having that integrated into training for the next coming years as well. It was taken on a really positive note by everyone that went through the training, so we're excited to see where this goes in the next few years. Pride Week. This was the first year that we have ever hosted a Pride Week. We've always had the Pride Parade, and this year we extended it to an entire week. We had events with various clubs and societies on campus, off campus, working with the town, and it was really well received. I'm hoping that we can kind of work out any kinks that there were this past year, this coming year, and see even more students participating in events throughout the week and not just the parade, which is super exciting. But the parade went really well, and the event that we held afterwards was high attendance, really positive feedback, and I think it was just a really great way, especially for first year students who are new to campus, to kind of meet people and get a sense of what the Mani community is like. On a harms reduction note, this year we worked, myself and the health services coordinator, Maggie Pickard, worked really hard on harms reduction in terms of promoting our Keep It Social campaign that Mount Allison is a part of. We held a campaign leading up to Halloween that I believe we called Keep It Spooky, which was really fun, and we had booths across campus just to kind of introduce people to the campaign. I feel like it wasn't really well known before, and we'd also put together a video before last class bash first semester to talk about safe drinking tips, how to keep it social, and we shared that on the MASU Facebook page. So we're hoping in the next year that we can really see an increase in harms reduction being shared across campus, and really promoting the Keep It Social campaign. Clubs and societies. We had, oh my god, my hair. Sorry. We had executive training again this year. I believe this was the third year in a row. We kind of cut down the time while trying to make sure we incorporated everything that had been incorporated in the past, adding a few things, so that we really kept the attention of the executives who were taking the time to come and listen to what we had to say and present. So I think that went really well, and we've definitely seen a decrease in off-campus parties, and a lot of students, clubs and societies really taking advantage of the spaces on campus, but also within the town. So I think that has been a huge success for us this year, and I hope it keeps going next year as well. And the last point I wanted to talk about was residence leader appreciation. So this was kind of some feedback we'd gotten myself and the campus life coordinator, Brandon Pinio, had been involved in as residence leaders before stepping into our roles this year. And we knew how difficult it was and how little how little kind of appreciation we got for the work that we put in, not from our students in-house, but from the MASU. So that's something we really worked hard on this year to show the residence leaders, not just executives, but RAs and ACABIN as well, how much we appreciated the work that they were putting in. So we hosted 2 residence leader appreciation nights. The rest were cut short due to the pandemic, but they were really well received, and we're hoping to incorporate that a lot more next year. So stay tuned.
Hi everybody. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more about what I've accomplished this year in my role, and some of the objectives that I laid out the accomplishments of my staff, and finally the budget that was passed this year. Starting with my objectives, I had two key objectives at the beginning of the year. So the first of these objectives was the creation of a MASU technology plan. And the second of these objectives was the revision of operating procedures and bylaws. And so we've been able to accomplish both. So the first one, the technology plan, was passed by council some months ago. And so all of the necessary purchases have been made, and we're in the midst of implementation right now. The goal of this plan is really just to make the technology work for us rather than us kind of have to fight it, and to allow us to deliver more to students as a result. Then the revision of the operating procedures was a group effort of which two kind of students took part, and then as well as some staff. I'll talk about the students first though, and I'll include the staff in the staff section. So the students that took part were Councillor Charlie Burke and Brendan Barrett. Not Councillor Brendan Barrett, student at large Brendan Barrett. Councillor Burke led a pretty comprehensive review of job descriptions for the executive, as well as just kind of bring some things into line between our OPs and our bylaws. And Brendan Barrett led a team that made a bunch of recommendations about changes that could be made to our funding applications, which will probably be implemented in the summer. Unfortunately, we can't implement those during the year because our OPs restrict us to ensure that students have consistent applications throughout the year, and I think that makes sense. When it comes to staff, my staff, John Briand and Rebecca Howlett, both did a lot of really great work on the OPs and great work themselves this year as well. John Briand, our appointment chair, now human resources chair, led a lot of changes to our job descriptions, as well as just kind of the way that our jobs work, as well as conducted a really successful hiring term this spring. Councillor Howlett, on top of running 3 really successful elections, did a really great job updating our election procedures, bringing them kind of up to date and kind of updating and fixing some idiosyncrasies. So we're in a really good place right now, and I'm really confident about the strength of the operating procedures for elections going forward. Finally, the last thing that I'd like to talk about is the budget. So this year's budget is not reflective of COVID-19, but it was passed conditionally. And so what this means is that basically the budget, if a couple of certain things happen, basically if the fall semester isn't in person, or if student enrollment changes a significant amount, then it'll have to be revisited. But otherwise, the budget that we have is what we're going forward with. So to highlight a few key changes, I'll just kind of point to 2. And so the first is the increase in some conference lines, as well as some travel lines, as well as an honoraria for a student. And so this student basically is an Indigenous student representative, and this is also the reason the increases were made to the conference lines. And this student will be a representative for the MASU and Mount Allison students at the Canadian Alliance of Students Association, which is our federal lobbying group. And so they'll take part throughout the year at the planning sessions, as well as going to Ottawa and advocating on your behalf. The second change, major change, was the change to executive compensation. And so this is something that's been kind of a recurring topic over the years. And we felt like this was a good year to do it because the majority, 5 out of 6 of the executive are graduating. So we think that that's really emblematic of the fact that we think that this is necessary, even if we're not seeing any kind of benefit. And I personally won't see any kind of benefit from it. Traditionally, if you were to do the math, we can estimate that executive had been making around $8.50 an hour. And so that's now brought up to around $11.50. It's still below minimum wage. It's still below, what you'd make working at an ice cream parlor. But that's okay. We think that this is a reasonable amount that's going to kind of make the position more accessible. And that was really the key focus of that increase, is that we didn't want a student union whose leadership was limited by the ability to afford to be part of it. And so we felt that doing this would make it a more accessible position. We could get leaders from a broader walk of life. So thank you for taking this time to listen to me. I really appreciate it. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to email masufinance@mta.ca. Thank you so much.